Hi everybody, hello and welcome. This is the same day that I filmed the Malaysian orchid or Malaysian grapes plant. I realized I didn't actually show you guys my shirt. I freaking love this. My mom got me this for my birthday, I believe. I don't know, I just think it's silly. But wonderful. So this over here is a beautiful philodendron that used to be kind of hard to find. Used to not be very prevalent in cultivation, and it's just kind of exploded in popularity, and with good reason. So this is the Philodendron Mayoi. This is just packing material because I just got this from North Shore Tropicals out here in the Vancouver area, the North Vancouver area. Highly recommend her plants, by the way. But yeah, I have a few of these now, and I find them to be really easy growers. They're really easy to propagate. They're a pretty fast growing philodendron, and they're very just interesting to look at plant as it matures. It gets more dissected. Its leaves get a little more interesting as it grows, and the way that these guys come in is just so cool. Another thing I've noticed about this plant, this is the cataphyll. This is like the protective sheath. They stay on the plant for a really long time. I'm not sure why exactly, but it's pretty cool. These are the aerial roots, just a little bit more, kind of ID. If you're gonna propagate this or air layer it, I'd recommend cutting in an internode. And these roots, they can grow into water roots, but they can also cling into like a moss pole or something like that. Like, they're very adaptable plants. So the actual true species of Philodendron mayoi is a native of Brazil. It's native to kind of central Brazil, getting into central coastal Brazil. So think areas like Goiás, Goiânia, Tocantins, kind of extreme central Brazil, and then going down into like Espírito Santo and even like the northern states, Piauí, that kind of area. That is where this plant naturally thrives. One thing that I personally find very interesting about Mayoi is how deeply its lobes dip. It almost reminds me a little bit of a Monstera pinnata partita, but they have this beautiful branching midrib, and it's just really interesting. The lobes, like the apical terminal lobes of these guys, are typically in threes, which is pretty unique in the philodendron world. And the color is really rich on the bottoms. It's not the kind of plant that has like really faded bottoms in comparison to the tops. It is quite a rich color underneath as well. So with Philodendron mayoi, just in the trade in general and purchasing online, for example, you might see these listed as Philodendron Tahiti, named after the island in the French Polynesian archipelago. But they're kind of not the same. So Tahiti is a little bit more lobed, it's more dissected. The leaves are a little more extreme. However, with the standard Mayoi, they kind of look like this. They're very blobulent. I mean, I can't really think of a different word. They're kind of reminiscent of Thaumatophyllums, or like the Bipinnatifidum philodendron. They're very dissected. They're super cool. But yeah, so not all Mayois are Tahitis. Tahiti is a subset of Mayoi. It's kind of like a cultivar or like a version of Mayoi that's, kind of been bred to be very dissected. So I was actually kind of scared when I saw this plant this morning because I saw this part of this leaf here is kind of, faded. That looks very reminiscent of thrips damage. So thank God my collection's been thrips free for, I want to say, like 6 months or something like that at this point. But thrips are scary. You do not want thrips. And this particular philodendron, I find this one and the Nangaratense, or the fuzzy petiole, are very, very susceptible to thrips. Thankfully, this is just shipping damage. It's pretty cold. Thought I saw thrips. No, I didn't. It's pretty cold where I am right now. It's hovering around 0 degrees Celsius. So they can get shipping damage. But just to let you know, this kind of faded off brown yellow color and the thinning of the leaf is very reminiscent of thrips damage. If you see that and your plant hasn't been like shipped or moved around a lot and it's not in a lot of stress, then 9 out of 10 times that's caused by thrips. So although this isn't thrips damage, it's good to show you guys because this is very reminiscent of what thrips damage looks like. And if you can see it early on, you can catch them early on. You can get them on a younger instar where they're not like flying adults yet, and you can hopefully get it under control. These guys are heavy feeders. That's another thing I gotta say. So, to maintain this big canopy, you're going to need nutrients. And these guys are heavy nitrogen feeders. I give them a little bit higher than the recommended dose of liquid feed. Schultz just 7 drops. I do like 8 drops per liter. And they tend to really appreciate that. You can actually get these variegated, which is really cool too. More of a shade plant for sure, definitely more of a shade plant. You can grow them under supplemental lighting, but be very careful that you don't burn the leaves. They'll get kind of this orangey, muted, matte yellow color, and they'll get a little bit dull if they're getting either too much light or too little light. Usually it's because they're getting too much light. So that's just another consideration. So there's a big debate among these guys if they are crawlers or if they are climbers. You by all means can grow these on a moss pole, you can grow them along a plank and just secure them with horticultural tape. However, I've noticed, I have one upstairs that maybe I'll add to this video, I'm not quite sure, I don't feel like moving it, but they kind of start off crawling. This one's kind of starting. I don't know if you can see, not as much as like a Ploumanii or a true crawler, or like a Gloriosum, but they do crawl a little bit and they tend to overlap each other. And they'll continue to do that for a while till they produce like this J shape if you put them up a moss pole. But when they're accustomed to the moss pole, they will climb some. They'll climb a little bit. They can get up to like 6 feet tall actually. But it doesn't seem to be the kind of plant that really gravitates towards climbing. It seems to be more of a scrambler. If you look at it in its natural habitat, it typically just kind of snakes its way um, along the ground. But experiment, might as well try it. You know, it might look fantastic for you on a pole. Another thing that I gotta say about these guys is they're spider mite prone. Thrips, yeah, mealybugs. These guys get mealybugs. You really gotta look at the intersections of the leaves, particularly the sinus of the leaf, which is this area over here. That's where you're gonna find the majority of your spider mites and your mealybugs. What else should I say about this? Mayois are really fun, and you can get really big leaves. The leaves can be like over a foot wide and like almost 2 feet, deep. And your leaves are going to get bigger and they're going to get more mature and more interesting and more unique if you have it anchored to something. So even if you don't have it on a pole, if you have it in like a rectangular pot and you want to grow it as like a crawler, if it has more aerial roots and more to anchor to, you're going to get bigger, more mature leaves, which is really cool. So now speaking of cold hardiness, these guys can handle temperatures down to about 3-4 degrees Celsius. I think that's like 40 something Fahrenheit. I'm so sorry, I'm not really good with my Fahrenheit, but they can get near freezing. You'll notice that the leaves will get a little bit darker, they'll get a little bit less plump. That tells you it's time to go inside. But definitely not a hard freeze. Even mature plants will die right back to the cane, and then if you're very lucky, they won't shrivel under the cold, but definitely a plant that you want to keep warm. Your sweet spot is just room temperature, approximately 20 degrees Celsius. I think that's like 80 Fahrenheit, forgive me if I'm wrong, but that's kind of the sweet spot of this plant. They do well in relatively ambient, regular humidity, but you want to aim for at least 60% humidity. Planting them or putting them about a foot away from a humidifier is a good idea. Otherwise, you'll get a little bit of brown, crispy edges. In my personal experience, this is not a plant that's really susceptible to, chlorotic damage, getting damaged by chlorinated, fluoridated water. It's not very picky for me, but just to be on the safe side, I would really recommend, watering it with rainwater. If you're concerned about microbes in your rainwater, you can try watering it with, like spring water, relatively inexpensive at the store. I actually wrote a couple of notes on this. I want to see if I kind of, got what I wanted. Oh, yeah. So in its natural habitat, it can be kind of semi-arid in the highlands in central Brazil. So this plant is accustomed to drier periods when it gets colder out, which there would be like July, August. Here would be kind of December, January. So if you give them a little bit of a rest and don't water them quite as much in the winter, they will appreciate it. What's another thing I will say? Sometimes they get edema. So edema is like little they look almost like rust pustules. They're little brown spots, little brown protrusions, specifically on the midrib of the leaf. That's totally normal. It doesn't really go away on that leaf, but the plant should continue to grow. If you have sport variegation on your Mayoi and you notice like a sectoral spot where it is variegated, I recommend capitalizing on that. If you can find a way to reproduce that, there's not a lot of variegated stock of these, and you could potentially make a lot of money. So be careful with that, obviously, with respect to breeders' rights and people's existing cultivars, but you could make a lot of money on that. If your leaves are having difficulty unfurling and they're getting caught in this cataphyll, which does happen on occasion, I recommend spritzing them with water or even insecticidal soap. If you don't have like a reason for insecticidal soap, but you have some just kind of laying around, it's a good lubricant for these. I wouldn't recommend pulling the cataphylls all the way down though, because you really do risk bruising this leaf and then it'll continue. Oh, that's a cool sound. It'll continue to look like that as it unfurls, and it'll get weird stretch marks and stuff. Well, that's Philodendron mayoi. This video also applies to Tahiti, which is a cultivar of mayoi. If you propagate it, it's just a pretty fast propagator. I'd get a bigger chunk just to get going with at least a few nodes, just to kind of have good starting material. But yeah, I hope that was informative. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I'll try to make more videos like this, and stay blessed.